These are important events for us as Houghton College to be part of the community. Our Southern Tier campus has always come and tried to impact the area in and around Buffalo for many years with our students coming, internships, outreach events, and that type of thing. But more than outreach, we want to be a neighbor. And as neighbors, we want to be engaged with some of the issues that are very, very important issues, particularly as we talk about those things having to do with nonprofit organizations and how important they are in the backbone of our community. We're one. Houghton College is a nonprofit community. So we thank you for the work that you do. We know how much sacrifice goes into it, and we know that many times it's done because of passion, not because that you have a bottom line that's going to make you very, very wealthy. So you give much more than you get, and we appreciate that. Before I introduce Senator Gallivan, let me tell you a little bit about his background so that you know who you're going to speak, who we have speak to you, and then I'll come back and introduce Tom after the Senator's remarks. First elected in 2010, Senator Gallivan represents all or parts of Erie, Wyoming, Livingston, and Monroe counties here in the New York State Senate. For the past 3 years, the Senator has worked towards reducing the size and cost of government, upstate economic development and job creation, and common sense reform in Albany. Senator Gallivan has conducted a series of industry-specific hearings across the state in an effort to identify, reform, or repeal 1,000 of New York State's most burdensome and redundant state regulations and mandates that impede business growth here and across the state. In the Senate, Senator Gallivan serves on the Senate Economic Development and Small Business Committee, the Transportation Committee, the Higher Education Committee, which I'm very interested in, and some other committees as well. He is chairman of the Crime Victims, Crime and Corrections Committee and was appointed Deputy Republican Conference Leader for Economic Development. Prior to taking office, Senator Gallivan has served with the New York State Troopers and was twice elected Sheriff of Erie County. He's also the founder and owner of a private investigation firm. I'm going to introduce Senator Gallivan, and I would just ask you to welcome him for his time here today. We're not going to have questions for either he or Tom after their remarks, but we will have that time to get together afterwards, and you can get them in a corner and chat, okay? Would you please welcome Senator Patrick Gallivan.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm taking time out on a summer night in Western New York. I know the summer nights are very valuable. The rain is gone, the sky's clear, and we're inside. But at least it's a beautiful setting when you look out. Our district office is right across the street, so we look across Transit Road and see an office building. I've never come to the back, and I have visited Palladium upstairs. But driving back here tonight, it's really amazing, Scott, how you come back and it looks like a college campus. So I'm thrilled to be here and thank Houghton for hosting us and opening your doors to the community. I really do appreciate that. Units for helping put this together. We started our day and we're finishing our day. We actually co-sponsored a blood drive today over at Wyoming County Community Hospital that I'm told is very successful. So hope yours here is as successful as that one. Bravo Cafe, of course, is one of our citizen or business constituents and longtime friends and do a wonderful job. And I know we had a little bit of help from, I never heard of the organization before, the Young Not-for-Profit Professionals Network. Who is that? Raise your hand if you would. Or is that just a whole bunch of you? Got it. Got it. So we do appreciate the people that helped put this together, and especially Tom from Goodwill, who I'm sure you're anxious to hear from, and I view really as not the reason we're here, but the purpose for being here and giving you something of value that you can take out to your organization and help make it stronger and make it a little bit better. I'll tell you how this started. You've heard of my interest in business and some of my responsibilities in the Senate in business. We touch all or parts of 4 counties. So you see the counties right there. Starting 4 years ago, I started traveling throughout these counties when the opportunity to run for the Senate was there, and I decided to do it. And I kept moving around, and I kept hearing about the impediments to business. And I kept hearing about the lack of job opportunities, kept hearing about size and cost of government. And if I take a step back in time, I did have my law enforcement career. Public service was very, very rewarding. Then I went into the private sector and I started my own investigation and security company. I have a couple different partners. I'm not involved in any of the day-to-day operations now since I was elected to the Senate. This is what I do full time. But I just want to tell you one story about my time in business, which kind of put me over the edge to try to do something about it. Put your money where your mouth is instead of just complaining. I have a number of different stories. I had an unemployment insurance story, which you deal with that, a compensation story, deal with that. But there was one in particular. We were getting audited, and it was an audit, just a random audit, what they do in our business, and they do it in alphabetical order, so our time was up. And the Department of State Division of Licensing is who we're licensed by. We, of course, have to be registered with the Department of State Division of Corporation. So we had changed our name. And when we changed our name, it was about 2 months before our 2-year license period ended, and we had to apply for the renewal. And so I called the Department of State Division of Corporations and said, hey, we changed our name. Here's all the paperwork from the court, all that type of stuff that you need. And what do I do with it? Well, you send it in, we'll send this back to you. They did. We get our stamp, our seal, whatever the heck it is. I said, well, what about our license? We now have the corporate paperwork that reflects the name change, but our license that's right up on the wall, that says our old name. They said, that's easy. All you do is draw a single line through it, hand write in your new name. And I says, well, yeah, but we're supposed to notify you of that name change also, aren't we? This is the Department of State I'm talking to, Division of Corporations. And they say, yeah, but you're up for renewal in 2 months. You've got to get your renewal application in 2 weeks anyway. Just put it in. All the paperwork will be taken care of then. So we send that in. About 10 days later, the auditor comes in, Department of State Division of Licensing. Guy's got to be, he's a wily old veteran, probably been there 35, 40 years. And he walks in. The first thing he does, he walks in the room, and he looks to the wall. He goes right to this, sees a line drawn through it. He goes, what's this? And I said, well, we changed our name. Well, yeah. Well, why'd you draw a line through it and put it there? You're supposed to let us know. So we did. We called the Department of State. We talked to somebody, Division of Corporations. Here's our paperwork. Here's our seal. Here's all this stuff. They said to draw the line through it. And he said, they're corporations. They're in a different building. We don't even talk to each other. So that was one of the things that kind of put me over the edge. But think of it. You've got somebody dealing with the state, a business, and dealing with the state, trying to navigate just one little thing like that. And it's so many different things. And I think I tell that story now to tell you how we got here tonight, but I would venture to say, in talking to some people tonight and over the past several years in my capacity in the Senate, that you deal with a lot of those aggravating things, the paperwork where you should have done it in a capital letter and not a lowercase letter, that you didn't put a period here or a comma here, and you're dealing with all these aggravating things that New York State is putting in the way of it. So the idea of trying to advocate for small business, the idea of trying to advocate for those that are in a position to create opportunities for our families, for our friends, to try to invite other people in so that they can work here, they can live here, they can enjoy it, and they can sustain a family. Somebody can sustain a business. And of course, I know Tom will talk about this, you're in a business. It just happens to be a not-for-profit, and a lot of people don't recognize it that way. Those really were the things that were at the forefront of what my goals were when I entered the Senate, to try to deal with to do what I can to help economic development, do what I can to help small businesses, do what I can to help with the creation jobs, lower the size and cost of government. So towards that end, among the things that we did, I've served on different committees and whatnot, we put together a series of small business summits. And I felt a little bit of an obligation that when I would stand in front of a group of constituents to talk about how I legitimately try to properly represent the people of our district and the people of Western New York. And when I vote, while it can't be 100-0 all the time, I would hope that every time I vote, I'm voting the way that the overwhelming proportion of our community would vote. I hope I'm properly representing people that way. So I felt obligated to stand up and talk about some of those things. I'll get into just a few things, just a few minutes of some of the things that we've done with the budget and this legislative session. So that was part of it, but when we pulled all these businesses together, we wanted to try to do something meaningful. So it wasn't them coming in, taking time out of their business day and having 40, 50, 60 people in the room and listening to me just babble on about different things and having people sit there talking to themselves, oh yeah, it didn't work for us. Oh yeah, well wait till I give them a piece of my mind, that type of stuff. So what we did is we had an individual from Western New York who has traveled worldwide dealing with organization management, leadership, business development, team building, things of that nature. And we've actually focused, at first we focused on marketing. And we tried to give all these businesses, small businesses in our various communities here across Western New York, something of value when they walked out. And it was tremendous. I mean, the individual that we brought in is somebody that people would pay for to go to a seminar. And they would spend a lot of their business's money listening to him. Did anyone pay for you, Tom? No, I hope so. Tom's just as good when it comes to not-for-profits. Anyway, so we got tremendous feedback about it. And in discussions, as we're in all these different areas through these different 4 counties in Western New York, naturally you would find, and you deal with them, the person that is in business on Main Street in Warsaw is also involved in the Rotary. The person that's involved in business in West Seneca might be involved with units. The person that's involved in business in Springville might be involved in the Boy Scouts. And these are the people, yeah, they're business owners, but they're vested in their community and they're involved in their community and trying to make their community a better place. And so many are connected to not-for-profits. And we started hearing from people, well, what about not-for-profits? They could use something like this too. They're dealing with regulation. They're dealing with obstacles. They're dealing with challenges. So that's how we ended up with tonight. And I do thank you for being here. I apologize that you're the guinea pigs for this. So I would ask at the end, when we're finished with all this, please give us your honest feedback, whether it was worthwhile. If it is, can it be made better? How can we make it better? Things of that nature. And you have in your packet, there is actually an evaluation form, and it's not to grade us. It's really that if this is valuable for you, and it's something that in my position, that it's appropriate for me to try to bring people who help others, who help the community that we are all part of, and help you do your job better, then that's something I would look to continue to do and want to make it better. One other thing at the end, if you can just think of some of the things that might be impediments, I'll talk about regulations in just a few minutes, some very specific regulations that might be unique to what you do. If you can get down to the nitty-gritty and cite them, if you can even get down to the rule book that says it. In New York State, we've got we have nearly 3/4 billion regulations. I think it's 83 volumes. There's a picture in there. You'll see all the books. Nobody can possibly know all of them in your area of expertise and what you do. And our original goal was to try to take on 1,000 regulations. We identified over 2,200 that were impediments to business, and we're trying to do something about it, one by one. Some of them are small, but all these small things, I think, can add up to us making a somewhat significant impact. So anyway, that's what brought us here tonight. I am really honored to serve in the Senate and to represent you and others in Western New York. It really is pretty humbling that people are willing to put their trust in you. And I really do try to honor that trust and try to legitimately represent people in the district. And we try to help whenever we can. When somebody calls, we've got these boundaries here. We don't pay attention to the boundaries. If somebody calls us for help, we actually try to help. Mitch Martin is our community representative in Erie County. Keith Bryan is our Director of Policy and Constituent Service. If you have specific issues afterwards, we'll all be around afterwards. If there's specific things that might need follow-up, connect with any one of us, and we, of course, will follow up in the coming days and weeks and whatnot. I started in 2010. That was the year that I was actually elected into the Senate. In 2009, 2010, New York State imposed $14 billion of taxes and fees on everything and everybody that moved, and it affected everybody, including not-for-profits. And the combination of some of those things that affected my business, some of the other goofy things that were going on, that's when there was a late budget that went to August, record late. Every day you read about Albany like you're reading about Washington now, where nothing was getting done. That was kind of the impetus that I said, I can't complain. This wonderful opportunity is here to stand up and try to do something, and so we moved ahead. So the last 4 years, I think we've made progress, but we have a long way to go. I mean, I don't pretend that it's perfect. I don't pretend that we've made huge progress. This is a great big ship, New York State, that $140 billion budget, $750 million regulations, so we've got that high cost, the size and cost of government, that's huge. The regulations, huge. We are 48th, 49th, 50th in every category as it relates to being friendly to business, as it relates to high taxes. But we have made some progress. I mean, over the past 4 years, I mean, you go figure that you talk about having on-time budgets, like doing your job, and that's an accomplishment, but it hadn't been done for how long? We imposed the property tax cap. I know that that has presented challenges for school districts, has presented challenges for local governments, but to this point in time, had property taxes been levied the way that they had been levied in the 10 previous years, just going by what the 10-year average was, that is $16 billion in property taxes that have not been taken out of the pockets of citizens over the past 4 years. So it's a step, a long way to go. We're still high. Westchester, still #1. Our counties in Western New York, when it comes to percentage of home value, still in the top 5, some of them are in the top 5 to 10 in the country as the highest tax. But we've made some progress. State spending, a couple years we reduced it, but in all 4 years, it has been kept under the rate of inflation, which is property tax cap is 2% or the rate of inflation. Last year, I think that might have been 1.6%. So the size of state government has gone down ever so slightly, still huge, 200,000 employees, way too many authorities, but some progress in those particular areas. We have been able to reduce taxes everywhere, a small amount. The interesting thing is when the state is so big, if we go to reduce the corporate or eliminate the corporate tax on manufacturers this year, it's just a small tax. You do that, you do something with an energy assessment that hits manufacturers particularly hard. You do just a couple of those things that might only amount to $90 or $100 for everybody, and all of a sudden that's $4 billion. And so that's a huge number, but minimal impact. So obviously we have to keep doing that. But nonetheless, those are some of the things that we have done. And again, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that that collectively in this two-party environment, in this upstate, downstate with, in a lot of cases, different people coming from different walks of life, different philosophies, different political philosophies, and there's always that tugging and pulling. We've made some progress, but we clearly have a long way to go. But we have done some good things, and again, that just highlights a few of the things that are there. In the way of regulations, we put together, Scott mentioned that we traveled across the state, and we did industry-specific hearings completely focused on regulations and trying to do something about regulations. We've done a little bit. I think all of you had to deal with the notification provision of the Wage Theft Prevention Act. Is that a yes, no? Does it sound familiar to anybody? Little thing, what you were supposed to do. I think it was only in play for 1 year, but you had every year, I think it was in February, give your employees a piece of paper to verify their salary, their rate, their benefits, all those different things. That had an estimated cost of $181 million to employers across the state. All that same information is already, for the large part, on their paycheck, or if they have an employee, if they have an individual contract, or there's a collective bargaining organization. So this year, that's one of the things as a result of our hearings, we were able to eliminate. But we traveled around the state. As we were doing that, when it related to nonprofits, only a few people came up and talked about it. We didn't focus on nonprofits. It was more on profitable businesses. But I would venture to say, without knowing, and I'm asking for your help on this as you fill these out later, that there are many of the same things in those different regulations of those reports that drive you nuts at the end of the month or at the end of the year. And so if you're looking for assistance in trying to change the way the state does some things as it relates to your businesses, your daily businesses, that's what some of this would be for. Anyway, we did that last year. We traveled across the state. I thought it was pretty successful. Now those are all the books of regulations that are there. Now the work is cut out for us in trying to do something about it. Just this past year, we took on nonprofits. Mike Ranzenhofer, who is from Western New York, heads up the Senate committee that actually deals with nonprofits and took the lead on this. And I know that he consulted with some people in Western New York, some of the statewide organizations that you may or may not be a part of, and affected some changes that were done this year. If you're not familiar with them, if you have questions whether or not they apply to you, we can connect after, get you all the information that you need. So we did try to address a few of the things, and that was done just in this past year's budget. I know that it's not, no individual one is particularly significant, but again, if you go on the premise, if there's a lot of them to try to do something about, then the idea is you keep doing a whole bunch of these little things and they can add up. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is, for a period of time, my first 2 years, I chaired the Senate Standing Committee on Social Services. So we dealt in part with not the medical decisions as it related to Medicaid, but the delivery of those services, and then we dealt with, had oversight generally of the budget areas with all the TANF money, the Health and Human Service related money for the most part that came through. When we were going through the budget process, we were inundated with nonprofit organizations, mostly from New York City, some statewide, that came in. And of course, the same thing that you're concerned about is, where's funding going to come from? And despite my belief in nonprofits, despite my involvement in the United Way, my wife served on the board, my wife and I chaired the campaign back when I was sheriff in 2002. Despite those things, I really did not know a lot other than, geez, we get all these organizations, not just statewide, but in Western New York, that do a lot of good for people. Now all of a sudden I'm chairing the committee and chairing the budget committee that has oversight of this particular area. And I'm thinking, how do I do this? This is billions of dollars. So some of you may know a gentleman named Brian Wing, who was working as a consultant. He was, for a period of time, the commissioner, state Medicaid director at one time, and he was then commissioner of the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. We brought him on. He was out working as a consultant. We kind of pulled him out and brought him back into his world, and he did the work on the committee for us. But what we actually then put together, we started looking at things and trying to figure out how we could make recommendations. And I think the responsible legislators that you would deal with take this type of approach. What we started looking at was outcomes. Like, what are people doing? I mean, are they doing what they say they're doing? What are the demonstrated outcomes? What's the data behind it? And ultimately what we did, that's how our funding recommendations were made. So I chaired that committee for 2 years. In my third year, I moved on to the small business, and now this year chairing crime and corrections. Our office is still involved up to this point in time. We've been involved in making the recommendations when it comes to that portion of the budget. Now, when I say making the recommendations, we're not making them to the governor. The process is the governor puts his budget forward. Then the legislature, the Senate, and the Assembly have their response to the governor. And essentially the response is you take the governor's budget, And you might agree with some parts, you might disagree with some others, you might say that, hey, there's some things not in here that should be in here, and then that's essentially your response. Then the Senate and the Assembly get together, try to work out their differences, and then they try to work them out with the governor's office. So on the Senate side, and then dealing with the two houses, our office, Keith, who travels back and forth to Albany with us, was involved in that as well. And we've gotten pretty positive feedback by us taking that approach. I talked with Mike Weiner at length when we first started doing that. We asked for some of his advice in looking at things. And I'm not saying what we did was perfect, but that's how we tried to do it. And I'm only mentioning that to you so that when all of you, with your various funding applications to the state, your organizations, statewide organizations that are speaking on your behalf, so long as we're involved, and I would venture to say, again, the responsible legislators that are involved try to take that approach when they're looking at it, that you come forward, make a case, but show the results. And I think there's billions of dollars, of course, available. We know it's not enough, and it's scarce dollars, and you're all getting, you're squeezing blood out of those dollars. No pun intended, units, but I mean, I understand it's the old do more with less, and nonprofits especially are doing way more of that than anybody else. But I think that's a safe approach for you to be taken, and so long as there are enough responsible people in there that your organization is responsible and makes a good case, you'll have a number of advocates. The last thing that I would want to mention, when you're dealing with, because so often you're dealing with the state, well, governments in general, but the state, when you're looking for funding, looking for help with other things, you've got to be your own loudest advocate, whether it's you or whether it's in the collective or your statewide organizations. Reach out to the legislators, be a thorn in their side. Visit them in their offices. My opinion is trying to visit them in their district offices back home is much more valuable time. When you go to Albany, it becomes, on those Tuesdays, it's like a factory, people in and out, 5, 10, 15-minute meetings, people running in and out. Some of you guys that have been there, you have a list of 8 or 10 different people that you have to see. The time, for me anyway, is way more meaningful when I'm either sitting in your office, at your facility, or at your organization, or we're sitting across the street and talking there without the distraction of everything going on in Albany. And again, that's just my view, but I think as you're advocating, part of that has to be reaching out to your local legislators, the members of the Western New York delegation, and asking, and going further, demanding that they advocate for you. Because keep in mind, one of the things, our philosophy, like I mentioned at the beginning, they are your representative, not just as a citizen, not just as an individual citizen that lives on, 12 Downing Street, but as a corporate citizen. They're representing your organizations as well. So I hope that you take some things out of here that are meaningful to you. I look forward to chatting with individuals after, and I'm very sincere in wanting your input afterwards, whether it's positive or negative, and whether something like this becomes worthwhile. Because if it is, it's something that we'll look to continue so long as we can bring up something of value to you and your organizations, and in my case, of course, through the rest of the district. So I appreciate your time. I thank again all the people who helped to put this together, and I look forward to eating some of Phil and Bravo Cafe's food with you afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Real pleasure to have you here as well. I've lived in Washington State, in California, in Pennsylvania, and in Florida, as well as New York. This is the first state senator I've ever shook hands with. So I really appreciate your availability. He's across the street too, so now you know where he's at. And I think you heard the offer that he'd like to chat with you. And I think that's remarkable in this age where there's a lot of standoffishness and so forth. So we're really pleased you made the effort to come here. I want to introduce Tom Lynch as well, and Tom gave me a little bit of a bio to do this with, so the jokes are his, okay, so you'll have to talk to him about it. Here we go. Tom is currently the president and CEO of Goodwill Industries of Western New York, and the chairman of the board of the Veterans One-Stop Center of Western New York, a relatively new agency co-founded by Goodwill and the Veterans Housing Coalition. Tom has been with Goodwill for 3 years and was attracted to its mission of, quote, changing lives and communities through the power of work, unquote. Prior to joining Goodwill, Tom worked in the for-profit world for great companies like Fisher-Price Toys, during which he was the most popular dad on the block. There we go. He also worked for Corning Incorporated, where he held a variety of roles, including plant manager and engineering director, along with running a biotech business that developed novel products used in discoveries of drugs. And Bureau Veritas Consumer Products, where he worked as senior vice president of the Americas region for this quality assurance provider, serving major retailers and brands in the U.S., including Target, Walmart, Costco, Gap, JCPenney, Mattel, and McDonald's. If we can get discounts nice for any of those, that would be great, Tom. Tom was born and raised in Western New York and earned an engineering degree and an MBA from the University of Buffalo. Would you welcome, please, Tom Lynch.
Thanks, Scott. Well, first off, I would have to say this is going to be a tough act to follow, Senator Gallivan. Next time I'm going first. My big accomplishment today was we had a happy hour sale at our Goodwill stores, 50% off for the rest of the week if you're interested. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm a wanderer when I do, so if you can't hear me, let me know and I'll try to chain myself to the microphone, but it's not really what I do. So what they asked me to talk about was what did I learn in the for-profit world that I'm bringing to the not-for-profit world. So I was in the for-profit world for 30 years, and you heard some of the companies that I work for, great places to work. And I've been with Goodwill for 3 years. So when I decided to drop out of the corporate world, I didn't have another one left in me. I actually hit somebody that said Six Sigma. So they wouldn't let me back in. Anyone who's been in Six Sigma knows what I'm talking about. Anyways, I decided that I wanted to live in Western New York. I had traveled for 20 years. One time, in fact, when I came home, I drove into the driveway. My kids come down the driveway. They're small at the time. They have name badges on. They get halfway down the driveway. They turn around and say, "Mom, somebody's home." So I got the message. But anyways, so I wanted to make a difference in Western New York. I wanted to live here. And I had two other objectives. I wanted to run my own show, because I'm pretty much anti-boss at this point in my career. And I wanted a lot of financial upside. So along comes Goodwill. And I wasn't looking for anything in not-for-profits. That's not what I do. So along comes Goodwill, and I kind of get sucked into the interview process. So of my 4 objectives, I'm living in Western New York. Check that one off. We're making a difference, that's for sure. I now have 22 bosses because I have a board of directors, and I'm not even going to get into the financial upside part of it. I do get a discount at the stores, though, because I'm a senior, not because I'm a president. So anyways, first off, I don't let the opportunity pass not to give a quick commercial for Goodwill. So Goodwill of Western New York is independently chartered. We're our own 501c3. We've been around since 1920. The Goodwill movement itself has been around since 1902. It was founded in South Boston by a Methodist minister named Edgar Helms. And he was working with refugees and immigrants at the time. And he came up with this great idea that he would go to the rich neighborhoods, leave burlap bags, have the rich people fill the burlap bags with clothes. He would bring them back and give them to the refugees and immigrants that he was working with. And to his surprise, nobody would take anything. This kind of blew his mind. So he talked to some of them, and I'm going to encourage you to talk to your customers a little later on. But he talked to some of them and said, we don't want a handout. We want to provide for our own families. So he set up a little workshop, repairing some of the stuff that he got, furniture, sewing garments, putting buttons back on, paying the people that did it, and then spreading things out and letting them pay 5 cents or 10 cents. So they felt like they were taking care of their own family. And that sort of lives within Goodwill. We're not a charity in the sense that we don't give stuff away. We have mottos like a hand up, not a handout. Not charity, but a chance. That's sort of what drives us. We work with all kinds of populations and we were the first sheltered workshop in Western New York. And at one point, we were probably the biggest workshop in Western New York. We're not anymore, but we still have a workshop on William Street. We work with single moms. We have a lot of referrals from Erie County Department of Social Services. We work with folks that are developmentally disabled. We have a great relationship with OPWDD for anybody who plays in that world. People with mental health challenges, economic disadvantages. Scott mentioned that we co-founded the Veterans One-Stop Center of Western New York, which is on Main Street, right next to Delta Sonic downtown. That was an awesome thing that we did in conjunction with the Veterans Housing Coalition. So what that is it's a collection of 50 agencies under one umbrella. And about a dozen agencies actually work on site. We moved our entire Veterans Employment Group from our headquarters on William Street there. So because somebody was coming up to us, a veteran was coming up to us, and they wanted a job. That's basically what we're in the business of. All right, but they didn't have a place to live. They might have had an addiction problem. They might have had transportation. Might have had housing. So when they came to us on William Street, we would say, well, first off, you need housing. You can't just get a job. You don't have any place to live. So tell you what, in about 20 minutes, there's going to be a bus come rolling down William Street. You hop on that, take it down to Main Street. Another half an hour or so, you'll get another bus or take the train down to Belmont, see if they can help you. It wasn't working. We were losing them. So this idea of a warm handoff, which is what the One Stop Center is based on, is awesome because now if they don't have housing, we take them and say, you come with me. I want to introduce you to Catherine from Belmont. She's right here. She's going to take care of you. And then tomorrow, you come on back, have a Paula's Donuts. We get Paula's Donuts 3 days a week. Awesome. We're going to run a diabetic clinic in the not too distant future. But anyway, that's, and for me, that was incredibly energizing. And I think for everybody that worked on it, it was incredibly energizing to see all these agencies working together for one goal, to help a veteran change their life. So that's what Goodwill is all about. The Agency Executives Association, as you might guess, is an association of agency executives. All right, but what its purpose is really to promote collaboration and networking. So, and we're in the process of retooling ourselves. It's not an independent thing, it's an initiative of United Way, much like the Young Nonprofit Professionals Organization, which, oh, by the way, if you can do me a favor, I'm lobbying to change it to the Young at Heart Nonprofit Professionals Association, so Scott and I can join. So anyways, it's an organization of executives that are really trying to reach out and help other executives in the nonprofit world through networking, through promoting collaborations. We have education events. We're trying to set up a network or a mentoring program that works more like a buddy program, a little less formal than a mentoring program. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email. I have my email up later in this, but shoot me an email or talk to Adam or Ryan, and they can hook you up with that. Okay, so now let's get on to this. So this is one of the things that I brought from my corporate life that, frankly, I've had up to here, but it's incredibly important. All right? Mission, ethics and values, governance, and finances. Let me talk a little bit about those. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because you probably heard a lot and I've talked about it a lot. So mission is really simple. And from the corporate world, I've sat through 3-day mission statement meetings, retreats that you had to go to. It's pretty simple. Why are you here and who are you serving? What's the action? What are you doing for a living? And what's the result? So Senator Gallivan mentioned that one of the things that he's concentrating on and what inspires him to take action on our behalf is talk about the results. So here's Goodwill's mission. We help individuals and families in our community achieve a better life through work and independence. Talks about what we do, talks about who we do it for, talks about the result, and we measure all those things. Here's Philip Morris's mission. Philip Morris USA's role is to responsibly manufacture and market Philip Morris brands to the adult tobacco consumers in a financially disciplined way. All right, from a mission standpoint, that is an excellent mission. You may choose not to work for that company with that mission, but it definitely says what they do. They're not going to go out and cure cancer anytime soon. They're busy causing it. But having a good mission statement, having people understand what that is incredibly empowering. Lets people make decisions because they know what's important. to the organization and what they're trying to do. The next thing is ethics or values. This really defines how you accomplish your mission. What are the rules? All right, so you can have a value that says, I'm a profit maximizer. There's nothing wrong with that. That's your value. It means that you're not gonna subvert profits for goodness or helping the poor or any of that kind of stuff, because that's not what your value is. Goodwill's values are different than that. We value people and transparency and all kind of stuff, like I'm sure all you guys do. But understanding what your values are, reinforcing them, talking about them, making sure that everybody understands, maybe not the exact words, but what's important to the company. Values, how long do you think values, quick show of hands, how many people think values should be looked at and changed every year? How about 5 years? 10 years? I would argue 100 years. Because this is the core. This is how companies or agencies really run. The next thing is governance. This talks about the policies and rules and regulations about how you choose to run or how you plan on running your agency or your company. And it's all important stuff. Fiduciary responsibility, risk management. Maybe as we're busy saving the world as what we try to do, we don't think we have time for this kind of stuff, but this is the kind of stuff that gets you into trouble and diverts you from what you really want to do, and that's your mission. I told you I was going to go fast. Finances. I'm a firm believer in you can't manage what you don't understand. How many people know of agencies that went out of business because they ran out of mission? Yeah. How about running out of money? Yeah. This is tough. I've talked to people that are in the Agency Executives Association don't want anything to do with this. But you can look around, you see agencies that went under because they weren't paying attention to what was going on in the financial side of it. We've seen agencies go out of business last year. Phoenix Frontier, they've been around for 25 years. They ran out of money. They ran out of mission. So this is the big thing that I learned. Whether you're a for-profit or a non-for-profit, if you run out of money, bad things happen. So this is kind of the theme I'm going to have. I don't see a lot of difference between for-profit and not-for-profit. I see a huge difference between big corporations and not big corporations. But I think the rules are the same. I think so when I interviewed for the Goodwill job, they asked me a couple of questions that were really interesting. Now, they had my resume. I had to answer a 12-page questionnaire about what I believed and all this kind of stuff. They had 3 personality profiles they had done, so they pretty much knew who I was. So one question they asked was, have you ever worked for a not-for-profit before? I said, not on purpose. That warmed them up. They were business guys. But at any rate, so let me get on to some of the things that maybe are a little less evident than that. The first one is you manage processes, not people. When I came to Goodwill, the first thing I heard was, we're a nonprofit. We're in the people business. Well, that might be true. But if you don't have the processes right, it doesn't matter whether you have good people or not. And I'll give you an example. All right, so at Goodwill, we handle about 50,000 pounds of donations a day. 4 tractor trailers roll in every day. And we unload them and we sort and we decide what we're going to sell and not going to sell and recycle, all that kind of stuff. All right, so one of the things we do at Goodwill is that about every 2 months, the senior staff rotates around and we're the Saturday supervisor. And there's a lot of good that comes from that. One is that we don't have to pay Saturday supervisors. 2 is it gets us closer to the people that we serve. Okay, so I'm in there this last Saturday. I'm the supervisor. And basically our job is when something goes wrong, you say, well, what do you think you should do? And they tell you, you say, yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't you do that? All right, so here's the problem. We were overloaded. We had no empty trailers because when a trailer gets full at the Tops parking lots, where most of them are, we have to take that one out, put an empty one there, and then do our magic with the trailer that we had. We didn't have empty trailers. Our dock was full. Everything was full. It didn't matter how much I yelled or screamed at the people on the dock. Didn't matter how good they were. They couldn't do their job. It was a process problem, not a people problem. So I would argue that it's not people generally screwing something up. It's the process that's screwing something up. You didn't give them the right tools. You didn't tell them what you really wanted to do. You didn't train them the way you're supposed to train them. Whatever it might be, it's usually the process, not the people. The next thing is focus on continuous improvement. All right, then I've heard, but we've always done it this way and it's always worked. Well, you know, you got to think about what the possibilities are. And you have to talk to your customers and make sure that you're really still meeting their needs. You know, back in the 1930s, we were, you know, our sheltered workshop was repairing furniture. Great. It was great. It put people to work and it was important, and American furniture and all that kind of stuff. You know, nobody's going to pay to have something that came from IKEA or Walmart or Target to have their furniture repaired. If we were still doing that, we'd be out of business by now. So think about continuous improvement. How do we get better at what we're doing, whether we're making a product or delivering a service? The next thing is valuing incremental gains. Everything doesn't have to be a home run. All right, we've done some minor changes at Goodwill that over time, it's kind of like Senator Gallivan was talking about, $100 here, $100 there, all of a sudden it's real money. Same thing with us. And I will bet you the same thing in your agencies as well. The next thing is celebrate success. You know, and if I see a big difference between the for-profit world and the not-for-profit, this is probably one of them. I don't think we do a good job at this. Because, you know, we're curing poverty or something. And, you know, no sense celebrating, one, because we got 100,000 left to go. But, you know, for us, we try to celebrate all the time. If one person gets a job, that's a cause for celebration at Goodwill. And if one person keeps that job for 90 days, it's cause for more celebration. You know, it not only motivates you as a leader, but it motivates the folks that are doing the work besides. Not that leaders don't do work. I tell that to my folks all the time. Next thing is measuring performance by customer satisfaction. This is probably another difference that I've seen between for-profits and not-for-profits. In for-profits, customer satisfaction is the be-all and end-all. If they're not satisfied, they don't buy your product. You know, one of, I think, the problems in the not-for-profit world is that our clients don't have a lot of choices. So the things we were doing, the things we measure, how many units did we deliver, how many people did we place in housing, how many people did we see, all that kind of stuff doesn't mean anything if the client that you're serving isn't happy with what the result is. So you get them into housing, it's, you know, flea infested and in a high crime area, you get to check off housed one, but you don't have a happy client. And at the end of the day, if you don't have happy customers, you don't have a very good business or agency. So developing new products and design them for efficient manufacture. I come from the manufacturing side, so I had to stick this one in. But services are no different than, services are products. So you think about these products, cameras. I can't remember where my camera is, much less last time I used it. Well, I'll tell you where my camera is. It's right there, built into my cell phone. So, you know, think about the people that were in the camera manufacturing business or fax machines. I mean, we have people that are joining us at Goodwill now and asking, is that the printer? No, that's the fax machine. What's a fax machine? And why would you want to use one? Encyclopedias, how would you like to be in that business right now? The only thing I'd use an encyclopedia for is to hold up the corner of my desk when I'm asking Google something. So, you know, you always got to look at what you do and think if there's a better way to do it. Because I guarantee you from the for-profit world, if somebody comes up with a better way to do what you're doing, you're done. And we used to have a saying when I worked for Corning that we want to be the ones that put ourselves out of business. And we should look at the services we deliver the same way. Treat suppliers and customers like partners. This is something that some for-profit companies do a great job at, and some don't. Some treat especially their suppliers, they treat their suppliers like the enemy. They come in, they sit them in a little lower chair than you're sitting in, because you kind of got that power thing going. But Corning especially, and with Bureau Veritas, the testing company that I worked for, to a lesser extent, but still it was pretty important, we got our best ideas from them. We got our best ideas from our customers who said, you know, this would work so much better if you just did this. And we have, like I mentioned before, we have a sheltered workshop at Goodwill. So we do light manufacturing and assembly, kind of like Allentown Industries is probably a little bit better known than us. But we do similar stuff. So our customers are coming in and we want to get more work from them. And the problem is that they need their stuff turned around faster. They said if you could turn our stuff around in 3 days, we would give you twice as much as what we're giving you. But You take 5 days now, and sometimes it's 4 days, and some days it's 8 days, and that doesn't help us. We can't plan around that. So we retooled the way we did things. We actually picked up some consumers and some business from Phoenix when Phoenix went under, so we got bigger to allow us to do that better. And now we're turning product around in 3 days 95% of the time. And our business is booming. And if we didn't do that, somebody else would have done that. So the best ideas can come from them. Sometimes we're so close to what we do, we have a hard time imagining that there might be a better way to do it. Here's a real tough one. Get the right people on the bus. And this one I think nonprofits would, what about old Tom? He's been with us for years. Well, maybe old Tom shouldn't have been with you for years. And maybe old Tom should have done something to keep his skills a little more current than he did. Maybe Tom should give up the typewriter and try a computer. Because we're not here to serve old Tom. We're here to serve our customers. And if old Tom doesn't do such a good job serving our customers, then he should go find something else to do. Or we should help him find something else to do. And this is probably the one thing that I'm guilty of at Goodwill. So when I joined Goodwill, we were transitioning from really a status quo organization to a growth organization. The previous CEO, Florence Conti, wonderful woman, took over the agency 10 years before I got there, and the agency was going over the cliff. Running out of money, struggling to meet payroll, credit line tapped out. Probably people here that can imagine what that was like. Her job was to stabilize the agency and save up a little bit of money. So she did what every turnaround person does: clamp down, sign every check, sign every purchase order, don't spend anything, measure the pencils before you allow them to take another pencil. All that kind of stuff. It was awesome. She saved the agency. All right, but it was stagnant. It was about a $6 million agency coming into 2000, and it was about a $6 million agency coming out of 2010. So the board of directors, the board of trustees thought we should, for Goodwill, for a model as unique as ours, and we call ourselves a social enterprise, for a model as unique as ours, we should have a way bigger impact on the community. All this talk about economic development, really Senator Gallivan and us are in the same business. We're in workforce development to support economic development. And we needed to have a bigger impact than we did, and that meant we had to grow. But we had a status quo organization that attracted status quo people, and we needed to have growth people. And it's tough to make a status quo person a growth person any more than it's hard to make a growth person a status quo person. In fact, one of the questions they asked me, as you can imagine in my interview, was, Tom, what are your weaknesses? Of course, I was expecting that because I've been through the interview process a few times before. So I said, I'll tell you what my biggest weakness is. I'm not a status quo person. In fact, if you're looking for a status quo person, I could give you references that would tell you I would be a horrible hire. Don't ever do that. You can't, it's hard to make one. And I should have changed the players on the bus. And now, after 3 years, the players have kind of naturally evolved in, but it was more painful for them than it needed to be, and it was probably more painful for us than it needed to be. So you figure out who you got on the bus first, and then you figure out where you're going to go. And that's important, and it's tough. It's tough to do in the for-profit world. It's especially tough to do in the not-for-profit world, because we're not in the business of getting people out of jobs. We're in the business of getting people in jobs, but it's incredibly important, and you have to remember who you're here to serve. Here's a real key one: valuing transparency and facing the bad news when you find out about the bad news. You know, and this is, again, something I've noticed that's a little bit different in the for-profit world. They would drag the bad news out of you. You know, there would be no, gee, I think I'll wait for a while because I don't want to bother them with my problems. You know, we had conference calls every month, and we'd be sharing everything that goes on. But in the not-for-profit world, it seems like we want to protect people. Ooh, we're running low on cash, but don't tell anybody because it's just going to make them nervous and they can't do anything about it anyways. Personally, I don't think that's fair, because who are we to decide what information a person needs and doesn't need? You know, they may be getting ready to buy a house or a car, and you're about to go over the cliff, but you don't want to bother them with the whole going over the cliff thing. You have to face bad news. It never gets any better by itself. At least my experience, it never gets any better. And you owe it to the people that you work with and the people that you serve to share as much as you can. Share as much information as you can share. Here's one that I absolutely love. How many people have ever heard of big, hairy, audacious goals? It comes from a book called Built to Last by James Collins, an awesome book. He actually wrote 3 books in the series. He started with Built to Last. It was all about great companies and how they run. And he got a lot of criticism when the book came out. It was a wonderful book. But the criticism was, okay, you told me how great companies run, but you didn't tell me how to get there. I'm not a great company. I'm a good company. How do I get to be one of those guys? So he wrote another book called Good to Great, which was also awesome. But then he wrote a 3rd book, because some of the great companies, the built to last companies, they didn't last. So he wrote a book, Why Great Companies Fail. All 3 of them are wonderful books to read. But anyways, he introduced this concept of setting a big, hairy, not an incremental goal, not that those aren't important, but set something really big out there that really jazzes up your organization. So here's one from Amazon. I love this one. Every book ever printed in any language, all available in 60 seconds. Can you imagine it, working for an agency or a company with a goal like that? How energized would you get every morning? You know, when you're working on something, you're thinking, okay, you know, I'm a software engineer and I'm going to start building a translator so that we can translate these things faster. You know, think about what's your agency's big goal. I'll tell you what ours is. By 2020, we kind of pulled a chapter from UB. So we have Goodwill 2020. And Scott mentioned I'm a UB graduate with apologies to Houghton College. But anyway, we have Goodwill 2020. So when I came in, we were $6 million. We said, okay, by 2020, we're going to be $20 million. So retail and donated goods is going to do this, and contracts is going to do something else, and human services, workforce development is going to do this thing over here too, and everything's going to be integrated and we're going to be great. And the board got excited, and we got excited, and some of our funding partners got excited, and our employees are excited, and we're on our way. In 3 years, we've gone from $6 million to $9 million. And we've got plans to continue at that growth rate. And oh, by the way, people are wanting to get on the bus with us now because they want to be part of something like that. Now they see career opportunities. And that's the beauty of doing that. And will we get there? You know, I would say yes, we're going to get there. But if we don't get there, it's not really going to matter. What's going to matter is we've got people excited about making a difference in their own life. They got excited about being part of Goodwill because they're going to have career opportunities and be able to grow with us. We're going to open more stores. We're going to do way more in workforce development. We're going to quadruple the size of our manufacturing shop so we can have more training opportunities. We can absorb all the cuts we're going to get in funding that's going to come in that area. So we're excited about it. So if you take away anything from this, think about this, setting a big goal for your organization. It's awesome. So here's the conclusion I reached. Bottom line versus mission. I don't think it's that simple. And again, when I was interviewing, they asked me that. What do you think about working for a not-for-profit instead of a for-profit? Or what do you think about being mission-driven instead of bottom-line-driven? And I said, you know, I don't think it's that clear. You know, when I worked for Fisher-Price, we made kids toys. We thought about, what's that kid going to think Christmas morning when he opens up that tricycle box and a wheel's missing? And you can't tell me he's not mission with Fisher-Price toys. You know, Scott mentioned that I ran a biotech business for Corning. Our mission was to help people cure cancer. And oh, by the way, we weren't the greatest payers in town. They could make more money someplace else. But we had a mission there too. And so I think maybe it's more of a 60-40, 40-60 thing. Because at Goodwill, you know, and I don't know what your board meetings are like, but as hard as I try to push, let's talk about job placements first. Let's talk about all the cool things we're doing in workforce development. They always want to know what the numbers are first. So I think it's not a simple thing. It's not bottom line versus mission. It's a combination of the two. You have to do both of them really well. So that's what I got. Can't ask questions now because we have to ask them over there. But Tom L. at goodwillwny.org, that'll get you to me. So if you're interested in the Agency Executives Association, if you're interested in anything I talked about, if you want to join my campaign about the Young at Heart thing instead of the Young Nonprofits, shoot me a note and let me know. Thanks.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Tom, so much. I think everyone resonates with so much of what's here, and probably a lot of things have been confirmed tonight for a lot of our leaders, and you have some extra excitement to go back starting tomorrow and implement some of these great ideas. I hope to do a couple of things before you leave tonight. Number one, I want you to be sure you get all the goodies that we have for you, the goodie bags and so forth. Go on through. The Bravo catering is still there, and it's waiting for you. There's some cookies there with your name on it that you've got to have, okay? As you make your way through there, I should have mentioned earlier, and maybe this is even more imperative at this point, the restrooms are just through the atrium here, and so you'll want to take advantage of that. But please also, Senator Gallivan is going to be back there, and Tom's going to be back there. I know you're going to want to personally thank them for coming tonight. Maybe you have a question or two for them as well. And I'd be remiss, so much of what the details of this were for tonight's wonderful event came from one of our staff members, James Janeski, who's back there in the back, and we'd like to thank him for putting this together. And we do hope that you will tell some people that we are here, that we are wonderfully involved in adult education, and we'd love to chat with you about that as well over here in the corner. Would you thank again Senator Gallivan and Tom Lynch for their time tonight?